The conference hall stretched for nearly a kilometer, its walls made of transparent crystal that showed the swirling purple nebula beyond. Jake Morrison stood at the podium, feeling the weight of 300 alien eyes watching him. Some of those eyes numbered more than 2 per head. Others glowed with colors that didn't exist in Earth's spectrum. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Grant clutched her data tablet, and diplomat Paul Henderson straightened his tie for the 5th time in as many minutes. They were here to make history. Earth's first formal application to join the Galactic Union, a coalition of 500 species that had maintained peace across the stars for 10,000 years. Jake had rehearsed his speech 100 times on the 6-week journey from Earth. He knew every word, every statistic, every reason why humanity deserved a seat at this table. What he hadn't prepared for was the laughter. It started as a low rumble from the Zelthari section. Chancellor Vrex, a being that looked like a mantis made of silver metal, tilted his triangular head and made a sound that the translation device rendered as amusement. Within seconds, the sound spread through the chamber. The Korthans, massive bear-like creatures with 4 arms, slapped their knees. The Vexarans, floating jellyfish entities in containment spheres, changed colors in patterns that their species used to express humor. Jake felt his face flush red. Beside him, Lisa's knuckles went white around her tablet. Paul took a half step forward, but Jake raised his hand slightly. Not yet. Let them laugh. Let them show their true colors. Chancellor Vrex rose from his seat, his metallic body catching the nebula's light. Commander Morrison, he said, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. Your presentation has been most entertaining. Chemical rockets that you used barely 60 years ago. Nuclear fission that you still employ in primitive reactors. And this artificial intelligence you're so proud of, it cannot even pass what you call the Turing test without human intervention. More laughter rippled through the assembly. A Korthan admiral named Thane stood up, his 4 arms crossed over his barrel chest. You have achieved faster than light travel for 5 years? We have been crossing the stars for millennia. You cannot even leave your own solar system without extensive preparation. What possibly makes you think you belong here? Jake took a slow breath. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but the casual contempt in their voices cut deeper than he expected. Earth had sent its best and brightest to this meeting. They had prepared detailed proposals, offered cultural exchanges, promised to share the unique perspectives that humanity had developed during its isolated evolution. None of it mattered. These beings saw humans as children playing dress-up at an adult gathering. Chancellor Vrex, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. Admiral Thane. Honored representatives of the Galactic Union, you're right that our technology is young. You're right that we've only recently achieved what you consider basic capabilities. But I would remind you that humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the near destruction of our own planet through our own ignorance. We have learned from our mistakes. We have grown. And we have done it without any guidance from species who had already solved these problems. That is precisely our point, Vrex said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been a smile. You are a species that nearly destroyed itself multiple times. You still have conflicts on your homeworld. You still struggle with basic resource distribution. You have barely left your cradle and already you want to join the ranks of civilizations that have transcended such primitive concerns. Lisa stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. Primitive. We've decoded our own genome. We've created quantum computers. We've developed fusion reactors that will soon replace all fossil fuel consumption. We've sent probes to every planet in our solar system and beyond. We've done all of this in less than 200 years of industrial civilization. How long did it take your species, Chancellor? The question hung in the air. Vrex's metallic face remained expressionless, but several other representatives shifted uncomfortably. It was a fair point, and everyone in the room knew it. The Zelthari had taken nearly 1,000 years to progress from industrial revolution to space travel. Most species took even longer. Humanity's rapid advancement was actually remarkable, even if the end result still lagged behind galactic standards. But Vrex wasn't about to concede the point. Rapid advancement without wisdom is not a virtue, Dr. Grant. It is a warning sign. Species that grow too quickly often collapse just as fast. We have seen it happen across the galaxy. The last thing the Union needs is a reckless newcomer disrupting the careful balance we have maintained. Paul Henderson finally spoke up, his diplomat's voice smooth and practiced. Then perhaps a probationary period, observer status while we prove ourselves. Surely the Union has protocols for integrating new species. We do, Vrex said, and you may apply for observer status if you wish. It grants you no voting rights, no protection under Union law, and no access to our technology or trade networks. You would essentially be allowed to watch our proceedings and nothing more. Perhaps in a century or two, we can revisit the question of full membership. Jake felt his jaw tight. A century or two. They were being dismissed like children told to come back when they grew up. He looked around the vast chamber at the hundreds of species that had built this incredible civilization together. Earth had so much to offer, so much to learn, so much to contribute, but these beings couldn't see past their own prejudices. We accept observer status, Jake said quietly. Paul shot him a look, but Jake ignored it. For now. But I want to make something clear to this council. Underestimating humanity has historically been a fatal mistake, for those who made it anyway. We are a species that thrives on being told we can't do something. We landed on our moon because two rival nations competed to see who could get there first. We split the atom because we needed to end a war. We reached for the stars because we refused to believe they were beyond our grasp. Inspiring rhetoric, Vrex said dryly. But the galaxy is not impressed by human determination, Commander. It is built on demonstrated capability. Show us you can maintain a stable civilization for more than a few decades without major conflict, and perhaps we will take you more seriously. The session ended shortly after. Jake and his delegation returned to their small ship in the docking area, a vessel that looked like a toy next to the massive cruisers and elegant yachts of the other species. As they boarded, Lisa threw her tablet onto a seat with more force than necessary. "That pompous metal insect," she muttered. "Acting like we're some kind of joke. Did you see how they were laughing, like we're entertainment?" "They're scared," Paul said quietly. Both Jake and Lisa turned to look at him. The diplomat shrugged. "Think about it. We went from horse-drawn carriages to spaceships in less time than most of their species take to pass a single piece of legislation. We're chaos to them, unpredictable. They like their ordered, stable galaxy, and here comes Earth, developing faster than any species in recorded history. Of course, they want to keep us at arm's length." Jake nodded slowly. Paul was probably right. The laughter had been a defense mechanism, a way to diminish a potential threat. But understanding their motivation didn't make the rejection sting any less. He moved to the viewport and looked out at the nebula beyond, its cosmic beauty indifferent to the petty politics of the beings who crawled through its depths. "Observer status," he said. "At least it's a foot in the door. We'll show them what humanity can do." The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks, and by the time they arrived, news of the rejection had already spread. The response was mixed. Some people were angry, demanding that Earth cut all contact with the arrogant aliens who had dismissed them. Others were philosophical, arguing that humanity needed more time to develop before taking on galactic responsibilities. Still others saw opportunity, suggesting that Earth should focus on building its own power base rather than seeking approval from beings who clearly didn't respect them. Jake filed his report with the Earth Defense Force and tried to return to normal duties, but he found his mind wandering back to that council chamber, to the laughter that had echoed off crystal walls. Lisa threw herself into her research, determined to develop technology that would make the galactic community take notice. Paul returned to the diplomatic corps, already planning the long game of building relationships with individual species rather than trying to win over the whole Union at once. 3 months passed. Earth continued its steady expansion into the solar system, establishing new colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Trade negotiations began with a few of the more open-minded species, those willing to deal with humans despite the Council's dismissal. Life went on. Then the reports started coming in. First, they were just rumors on the galactic information networks. Attacks on the fringe worlds, colonies going silent, distress signals cut short. The Union's official channels said little, but independent news sources painted a darker picture. Something was attacking the outer settlements, and whatever it was, the local defense forces couldn't stop it. Within 2 weeks, the rumors became confirmed facts. An ancient enemy called the Devourers had returned after 5,000 years of silence. The term meant nothing to Jake when he first heard it, but Lisa found references in the galactic databases that the Union had provided to Earth as part of their observer status package. The Devourers were biomechanical entities, half machine and half something organic that defied easy classification. They consumed planets, stripping them of all resources and leaving nothing but lifeless rocks behind. 5,000 years ago, they had ravaged the galaxy until a coalition of ancient civilizations had driven them back into the void beyond known space. Most modern species thought they were extinct or had left the galaxy entirely. They were wrong. Jake watched the news feeds with growing horror. The first attack had destroyed a mining colony on the edge of Zelthari space. 2,000 beings, dead in minutes. The second attack hit a Korthan agricultural world. 20,000 casualties. The third, fourth, and fifth attacks came in rapid succession. The Devourers weren't testing defenses or probing for weakness. They were attacking with overwhelming force, and nothing the Union threw at them made any difference. The Devourer technology was beyond anything the current galactic civilizations possessed. Their ships phased through shields like they weren't there. Their weapons broke down matter at the molecular level, turning battle cruisers into clouds of atomic dust. And their numbers seemed endless, ship after ship emerging from tiers in space that closed behind them. Within a month, 12 colony worlds had fallen. Billions of beings were displaced, fleeing toward the core systems with nothing but the possessions they could carry. The Galactic Union, so proud and confident, was in a state of panic. Their best military minds couldn't devise a defense. Their most advanced weapons barely scratched the Devourer hulls. And the attacks kept coming, pushing deeper into civilized space with each passing day. Jake sat in his office at the Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching a tactical display that showed the Devourer advance. Red markers indicated lost colonies. Yellow showed systems under attack. Blue represented Union defensive positions, and even he could see how pathetic those positions looked against the tide of red. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Captain Ryan Cole entered, a young officer who had served under Jake during the first human exploratory missions beyond the solar system. Ryan was tall and lean, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had faced danger and come out the other side. "Sir," Ryan said, "I've been following the situation in Union space. It's bad." "That's an understatement, Captain. I have a proposal." Ryan pulled up a chair without being invited, a casual disregard for protocol that Jake had always appreciated about the younger officer. "We sent a task force to help." Jake raised an eyebrow. "The Union made it very clear they don't think we have anything to offer." "The Union isn't under attack by an enemy they can't fight. Sir, we've been reviewing the tactical data they've made public. The Devourers are using advanced technology, yes, but they're employing it in very rigid patterns. They rely on overwhelming force and superior capabilities. They don't adapt, they don't improvise, they just hammer away until the defenses break. And you think humanity can make a difference? How exactly?" Ryan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because we're good at improvising, sir. We don't have shields that can stop their weapons, so we wouldn't rely on shields. We don't have ships that can outgun them, so we wouldn't try to trade fire. We'd hit them in ways they don't expect, use tactics they haven't seen, exploit the fact that they're rigid and predictable." "That's a lot of speculation based on limited data, Captain." "I know, sir, but what do we have to lose? If we stay here, we're just watching the galaxy burn. If we go help, worst case, we die trying to save beings who treated us like children. Best case, we prove that humanity deserves respect. Either way, it's better than doing nothing." Jake studied the younger officer for a long moment. Ryan was right, and they both knew it. Humanity had always defined itself through action, through the willingness to try even when success seemed impossible. Sitting on the sidelines while billions died wasn't in their nature. "I'll take it to General Harper," Jake said, "but I'm not promising anything. This kind of decision goes way above both our pay grades. General Lisa Harper, commander of the Earth Defense Force, listened to Ryan's proposal with her usual intensity. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray streaked hair and the kind of presence that made people straighten their spines without realizing they were doing it. She had led humanity through first contact, through the delicate negotiations with species that possessed technology far beyond Earth's capabilities, through the humiliation at the Galactic Council. If anyone understood the stakes, it was her. "It's a hell of a gamble," she said when Ryan finished his presentation. "We'd be committing significant forces to a fight that isn't ours to help beings who rejected us." "With respect, General," Ryan said, "that's exactly why we should do it, because it isn't about them accepting us. It's about who we choose to be. Do we help only when there's something in it for us? Or do we help because it's the right thing to do?" Harper smiled slightly. "You sound like the recruitment posters, Captain." "You're not wrong." She turned to Jake. "What do you think, Commander? You've met these beings, you've seen how they look at us." "I think they're terrified," Jake said, "and I think they need help whether they're willing to admit it or not. Captain Cole is right. This is a chance to show them what humanity is made of, not by begging for acceptance but by proving our worth through action." Harper nodded slowly. "All right, I'll approve a task force. 6 ships, volunteers only. Captain Cole, you'll command the operation. Morrison, I want you to handle the diplomatic side. Make sure the Union knows we're coming to help, not to gloat. Emphasize that we're offering assistance as a gesture of goodwill, nothing more." "Yes, ma'am," both officers said simultaneously. The Earth Defense Force had 12 capital ships, a number that would have seemed laughable to any of the major galactic powers. They were pieced together from human ingenuity and a few salvaged alien components that Earth had managed to trade for. They weren't pretty, and they certainly weren't sophisticated by galactic standards, but they worked. And more importantly, the crews that operated them were trained, disciplined, and motivated. Ryan selected his ships carefully. The EDS Valiant would serve as the flagship, a heavy cruiser that had been designed for long-range exploration, but had been refitted with weapons when it became clear the galaxy wasn't entirely peaceful. Joining her would be 2 destroyers, the Eagle and the Intrepid, and 3 frigates, the Challenger, the Endeavor, and the Defiant. Smaller than most Union warships, faster than they looked, and crewed by people who had grown up watching science fiction and dreaming of the stars. Lieutenant Amy Chen signed up as tactical officer aboard the Valiant. She was brilliant, a graduate of the Lunar Academy who had turned down multiple offers from private corporations to serve in the Defense Force. Chief Engineer Greg Palmer, a burly man with grease permanently under his fingernails, volunteered to keep the Valiant's engines running no matter what the Devourers threw at them. Across the 6 ships, 2,000 men and women prepared to venture into a war zone to help aliens who had laughed at them. Jake sent notification to the Galactic Union through official channels, explaining that Earth was dispatching a humanitarian task force to assist in defense operations. The response was slow in coming, and when it finally arrived, it dripped with condescension. The message from Chancellor Vrex's office thanked Earth for its concern, but suggested that human forces would be better served staying in their own space where they couldn't accidentally interfere with Union military operations. Jake showed the message to Ryan, who just laughed. "They're still treating us like children who might get in the way. Good. Let them underestimate us. Makes it easier to surprise them." The 6 ships departed Earth orbit on a gray morning, while millions watched from the surface. There were no grand speeches, no promises of glory, just quiet determination and the shared understanding that they were flying into danger for strangers who didn't respect them, because that's what humans did. The journey to the nearest conflict zone took 3 days at maximum speed. The Union's public tactical feeds showed a desperate battle at a colony world called Taloran IV. The Korthans were mounting a last stand to protect civilian evacuations, but they were losing. Admiral Thane himself was commanding the defense, his flagship and a dozen support vessels holding off a Devourer assault force while transports fled the planet's surface. Ryan plotted a course that would bring his task force in behind the Devourer formation, using the planet's gravity well to mask their approach. Amy studied the enemy movement patterns, looking for anything they could exploit. Greg ran constant diagnostics on the engines, knowing they'd need every bit of speed and power in the coming fight. When they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the scene before them was chaos. Talaran IV hung in space like a blue and green jewel, but the space around it was filled with fire and death. The Corthan ships, massive and powerful, were taking a beating. Their shields flickered under the assault of devourer weapons that looked like crimson lightning. Ships exploded in silence, their crews dying before they could even send distress calls. The devourers themselves were nightmares made real. Their ships were organic in appearance, like massive insects made of black metal and pulsing red tissue. They moved with purpose, coordinating their attacks with precision that spoke of hive intelligence. There were at least 30 of them, each one larger than the Corthan flagship. Ryan's comm systems lit up immediately. Admiral Thane's voice, strained and angry, came through. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves and clear this combat zone immediately. This is no place for civilians." "Admiral Thane, this is Captain Ryan Cole of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to assist." There was a long pause. Then, "The humans, what are you doing here? Your primitive vessels will be destroyed in seconds. Leave now before you get yourselves killed." "With respect, Admiral, we didn't come all this way to run at the first sign of danger. We're engaging the enemy. Try to keep up." Amy had already calculated firing solutions. The Devourers were focusing on the Corthan ships, treating them as the only real threat. They didn't even seem to notice the 6 small Earth vessels moving into position. Good. Ryan gave the order to fire. The human ships didn't have the kind of energy weapons the Union forces used. Instead, they relied on a mix of technologies: railguns that accelerated metal slugs to relativistic speeds, missile systems with nuclear warheads, and something Greg had cooked up in the Valiant's engineering bay that he called a gravitic disruptor. None of it was elegant. All of it was deadly. The first salvo caught 3 Devourer ships completely by surprise. Railgun rounds punched through their hulls with kinetic force that shields couldn't deflect. Missiles detonated in precise patterns, overwhelming regeneration systems. The gravitic disruptors, experimental devices that created temporary gravity wells, pulled 2 Devourer ships into each other with bone-crushing force. 3 enemy vessels were disabled in the opening attack. The Devourer formation, so precise and coordinated, suddenly had gaps in it. They started to turn, to adapt to this new threat, but Ryan was already giving his next orders. The Valiant twisted through space like a dancer, her smaller size making her far more maneuverable than the massive Corthan vessels. Ryan kept his eyes on the tactical display while Amy called out targets and Greg cursed quietly in engineering as he pushed the engines beyond their recommended limits. The Devourers were adapting now, recognizing the human ships as legitimate threats. 5 of the insectoid vessels broke away from the Corthan formation and accelerated toward the Earth Task Force. Their weapons charged, that terrible crimson lightning building along their hulls like a storm about to break. "Evasive pattern Delta," Ryan ordered. "Don't let them get a lock." The 6 human ships scattered in different directions, moving in patterns that made no sense to traditional military doctrine. They zigzagged when they should have maintained formation. They accelerated when they should have decelerated. They used the debris field from destroyed ships as cover, weaving between tumbling pieces of metal that would have been obstacles to larger vessels. The Devourer weapons fired, lances of red energy that could disintegrate a ship in seconds. But those weapons needed a clear line of sight and a relatively stable target. The human ships provided neither. The crimson lightning carved through empty space, hitting nothing but vacuum and occasionally destroying pieces of wreckage that the humans had just passed. Amy watched her screens with fierce concentration. "Captain, I'm picking up a pattern in their targeting systems. They're predictive rather than reactive. They calculate where we should be and fire at that location." "So they're shooting at ghosts," Ryan said with a grim smile. "Let's give them more ghosts to chase." He ordered the frigates to deploy electronic countermeasures, small drones that projected false sensor signatures. Suddenly, instead of 6 human ships, the Devourer's sensors showed 30 contacts moving in all directions. The enemy formation hesitated, processing the new data, trying to determine which targets were real. That hesitation cost them. The Eagle and Intrepid, the two destroyers, had circled around behind the confused devourers. Their railguns fired in synchronized bursts, targeting the same ship from different angles. The devourer vessel's hull buckled under the assault, its organic components rupturing and spilling something that looked like black blood into the void. The remaining 4 devourers targeting the human ships suddenly found themselves being herded. Ryan had positioned his vessels in a careful pattern, forcing the enemy to move in specific directions if they wanted to maintain offensive positions. The devourers, locked into their predictive targeting systems, followed the expected paths. Right into the asteroid field that Taloran IV's moons had created through millions of years of collisions. The human ships slipped through the field easily, their smaller size and superior maneuverability making it simple to avoid the spinning rocks. The devourers, larger and less agile, had to slow down or risk catastrophic impacts, and when they slowed down, they became easier targets. The Challenger launched a spread of nuclear missiles into the densest part of the field. The warheads detonated simultaneously, turning dozens of asteroids into thousands of high-velocity fragments. The shrapnel storm caught 2 devourer ships broadside, shredding their hulls with simple kinetic force that their advanced armor couldn't fully deflect. Admiral Thane watched from his flagship, his 4 arms gripping the command console in what might have been amazement. He had spent decades in the Corthan military. He had fought in border skirmishes, pirate raids, and even a brief war with a neighboring species over resource rights. He had never seen anything like what the humans were doing. They fought like prey animals, using speed and cunning instead of raw power. They fought dirty, using environmental hazards and deception. They fought with a creativity that his own strategic training would have dismissed as inefficient. And they were winning. The remaining devourers regrouped, their hive intelligence processing the tactical data and adapting. They stopped relying on predictive targeting and switched to saturation fire, filling entire areas of space with their crimson weapons fire. It was less efficient but harder to avoid. The Defiant took a glancing hit, her port side shields collapsing and her hull scorching. Emergency alerts screamed through her corridors as the crew scrambled to contain the damage. But she kept firing, her railguns never stopping, her captain refusing to withdraw. Greg's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I've got an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." "I'm listening," Ryan said, watching as another wave of devourer fire narrowly missed the Intrepid. "Their weapons work by destabilizing molecular bonds, right? Creates a cascade effect that tears matter apart. But that requires a constant energy stream to maintain. If we could interrupt that stream, even for a fraction of a second, the weapon would lose coherence." "How do we interrupt it?" "Electromagnetic pulse. Big one. We'd have to overload our reactors to generate enough power, and it would probably fry half our systems in the process, but it might give the Corthans the opening they need to counterattack." Ryan looked at Amy. She ran the calculations quickly, her fingers dancing over her console. "It could work, sir. But it would leave us vulnerable for at least 30 seconds while our systems reboot. That's a long time in a firefight." "Admiral Thane," Ryan opened a channel to the Corthan flagship. "We're going to create an opening for you. When you see the devourer weapons shut down, hit them with everything you've got. You'll only have one chance." "What are you planning, human?" Thane's voice carried a note of suspicion. "Something stupid that might just save all our lives. Be ready." Ryan didn't wait for a response. He ordered all 6 human ships to converge on a single point in space, forming a tight formation that would have been suicide under normal circumstances. The devourers, sensing an opportunity, concentrated their fire on the clustered targets. "Greg, do it now." In the engineering bay of all 6 ships, reactors were pushed past their safety limits. Massive amounts of energy built up in capacitors that were never designed to hold such charges. Warning klaxons blared. Safety systems tried to shut down the overload and were manually overridden by engineers who knew they might not survive what came next. Then, all at once, the stored energy was released in a directed electromagnetic pulse that washed over the battlefield like an invisible wave. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every devourer weapon that was actively firing suddenly cut out, the energy streams disrupted and scattered. The enemy ships went dark for precious seconds as their systems struggled to compensate for the electromagnetic interference. The human ships went dark too, their electronics fried by the very pulse they had created. They drifted in space, powerless and vulnerable, their crews working frantically in the darkness to restart essential systems using manual backups. But the Korthans were ready. Admiral Thane gave the order without hesitation, and his fleet unleashed a devastating barrage. Plasma cannons that had been charging, while the humans created their distraction, fired in perfect synchronization. Torpedoes that had been loaded and aimed found their targets without opposition. Energy beams that could carve through planetary crusts focused on the helpless devourer vessels. 12 devourer ships died in that single volley. The organic components of their hulls burned with an eerie green flame. The mechanical parts exploded in showers of sparking debris. The hive intelligence, so coordinated and precise, suddenly found itself with massive gaps in its formation. The remaining devourers began to retreat, jumping away in flashes of distorted space. The battle for Talaran IV was over. The colony was saved. In the darkness of the Valiant's bridge, Ryan heard Greg's voice over the backup comm system. "Primary systems coming back online, Captain. We're going to need major repairs, but she'll fly." One by one, the human ships powered back up. The Defiant had taken the worst damage, with her port side nearly gone, but her crew had managed to seal the breaches and stabilize her core systems. The other 5 ships were battered but functional. Admiral Thane's face appeared on Ryan's screen as communications were restored. The massive Korthan looked different now. The suspicion and condescension were gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. "Captain Cole," Thane said slowly. "That was the most reckless, illogical, and effective tactical maneuver I have witnessed in 40 years of service. You saved my fleet in this colony. I owe you a debt that cannot be easily repaid." "You don't owe us anything, Admiral. We came to help, nothing more. Your ships are damaged. My engineers will assist with repairs. It is the least I can do." Thane paused, his 4 arms gesturing in what human databases suggested was a sign of deep thought among his people. "I must also apologize. When your species presented itself to the Galactic Council, I was among those who laughed. I thought you were children playing at being adults. I was wrong." Ryan smiled slightly. "We get that a lot, Admiral, but we're used to proving people wrong." News of the battle spread through the Galactic Union faster than light itself. The story of 6 primitive human ships defeating a devourer force that had been overwhelming a Korthan fleet made no sense according to established military theory. But the sensor logs didn't lie. Neither did the 200,000 civilians who had been evacuated from Talaran IV before the devourers could reach them. On Earth, Jake Morrison watched the reports with a mixture of pride and concern. Pride because Ryan and his people had proven what humans could accomplish. Concern because this kind of attention was exactly what might make the situation more complicated. He was right to be concerned. Within a day, the Galactic Council demanded a full accounting of the battle. They wanted to understand how such primitive vessels had succeeded where advanced Union warships had failed. Some council members praised Earth's contribution. Others, particularly Chancellor Vrex, insisted it was luck and nothing more, but the attacks continued. The devourers struck at 3 more colonies in the following week, 50,000 casualties, then 5 more colonies, 200,000 dead. The numbers kept climbing and the Union's conventional defenses kept failing. Jake received a message from Dr. Lisa Grant. She had been working with a team of researchers, analyzing every scrap of data about the devourers that the Union's archives contained. What she had found was disturbing. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said when he arrived at her laboratory. She pulled up holographic displays showing ancient texts and star charts. "I've been going through the historical records, the really old stuff that most species don't even look at anymore. The devourers aren't just some ancient enemy. They're specifically mentioned in texts from a civilization that predates the current Galactic Union by millions of years." "Which civilization?" "They called themselves the Architects. From what I can piece together, they were incredibly advanced." They built structures that still exist throughout the galaxy, things that modern species can't even begin to understand. And according to these texts, they created some kind of defense system to fight the Devourers. Jake leaned forward, studying the documents. A defense system? Where is it? That's the strange part. The texts mention something called the Guardian Protocol. It was supposed to be a massive network of automated defense platforms, each one capable of fighting off entire Devourer fleets. But there's no record of these Guardians actually being deployed. It's like the architects built them and then just disappeared before they could activate them. Or maybe they did activate them, and that's why the Devourers disappeared 5,000 years ago. Lisa nodded. That's what I thought too. But if that's true, where are these Guardians now? Why aren't they responding to the current attacks? She pulled up another display, this one showing a star chart with several locations marked. I found references to specific coordinates in the texts. Most of them are in regions of space that are now heavily populated. Union surveys have been through those areas hundreds of times and found nothing. But there's one set of coordinates that's never been properly explored. She zoomed in on a section of the chart that showed the edge of known space. And right at the boundary was a small marker labeled Sol System, Earth's home. You're saying there's a Guardian here, in our solar system. I'm saying the coordinates match, and that's too much of a coincidence to ignore. The architects placed something in this system millions of years ago, and we never noticed because we were too busy looking outward at the stars. Jake stared at the chart, his mind racing. If Lisa was right, if there really was some ancient defense system in Earth's own backyard, it could change everything. But millions of years was a long time. Whatever the architects had built might have failed or been destroyed or simply run out of power. We need to search the system, he said, quietly. If word gets out that we're looking for ancient super weapons, the whole galaxy will panic. I've already started. I have 3 survey ships running extended sensor sweeps of the outer system, officially looking for asteroids suitable for mining. But we're using modified sensor arrays that should pick up anything unusual. 2 days later, one of the survey ships found something. Not near any of the planets, but in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, where the sun was just another bright star in the sky. There was a gravitational anomaly, a mass that sensors couldn't properly detect, but that definitely existed. Dr. Kevin Wright led the investigation team personally. He was a physicist who had spent his career studying exotic matter and theoretical technologies. If anyone could make sense of an ancient alien artifact, it was him. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks piloted the exploration vessel, a small ship called the Explorer that was designed for long-duration missions in deep space. They approached the anomaly carefully, running every scan they had. Visual sensors showed nothing but empty space. Radar returned no echoes. Even gravitational sensors gave contradictory readings. But when Kevin adjusted the sensor frequency to match patterns he had found in architect texts that Lisa had provided, suddenly the displays lit up. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. The structure that appeared on their screens was enormous. A ship, if it could be called that, measuring over 500 kilometers in length. It hung in space like a sleeping giant, its hull made of materials that didn't match anything in human or galactic databases. The design was elegant and alien, all smooth curves and geometric patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. "This is Explorer to Earth Control," Kevin said, his voice shaking slightly. "We have found something, and you're not going to believe it." Jake assembled a team immediately. If this was truly an architect guardian, they needed to understand it, activate it, and hopefully convince it to help fight the Devourers. But approaching ancient technology was dangerous. There was no telling what kind of security systems or automated defenses might still be active after millions of years. The boarding party consisted of Kevin, Sarah, and a dozen other specialists. Engineers, xenoarchaeologists, linguists, and soldiers, all prepared for whatever they might find inside the massive structure. They approached in small shuttles, looking for any kind of entrance. The hull seemed completely smooth at first, without any obvious hatches or docking ports. But as they flew along its length, searching, Kevin noticed something. Sections of the hull showed patterns that matched symbols he had seen in the architect texts. When he transmitted those symbols back to the structure using a standard communication laser, a section of hull simply vanished, revealing a bay large enough to fit their shuttles. "Well, that's either a very good sign or a trap," Sarah said. "Only one way to find out." They landed in the bay, which was filled with a breathable atmosphere that sensors said was safe for humans. The gravity was Earth standard, suggesting the structure could detect what kind of beings were entering it and adjust accordingly. The walls glowed with soft light that seemed to come from the material itself rather than any visible source. Kevin led his team deeper into the structure. The corridors were wide and high, built for beings larger than humans but adaptable. They passed chambers filled with equipment they couldn't identify, displays showing information in languages that shifted and changed, and occasional viewports that looked out into space with clarity that made the stars seem close enough to touch. Finally, they reached what could only be the command center. It was a massive chamber at the heart of the structure, circular in design, with a raised platform in the center. Around the platform, holographic displays floated in the air, showing data streams and images too complex to process quickly. On the platform stood a crystalline structure about 3 meters tall. It pulsed with internal light, colors flowing through it in patterns that reminded Kevin of neural activity in a brain scan. As the team approached, the light intensified. A voice spoke, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It used words they didn't recognize at first, but then the patterns shifted, the sounds changed, and suddenly it was speaking English. Identification required, species designation, origin world, technological level. Kevin stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We are humans, from the planet Earth, third world in the Sol system. We have achieved faster than light travel and basic quantum computing. Analyzing. Genetic markers match predicted evolutionary path. Technology level confirms readiness threshold. Authorization protocol initiated." The crystalline structure blazed with light. Holographic displays swirled around the chamber, showing images of the galaxy, of the devourers, of battles fought millions of years ago. Then the displays shifted to show Earth, its history, the rise of human civilization, every major achievement and failure recorded in incredible detail. "I am Sentinel," the voice said. "Guardian-class defense platform, 7th generation, designation 773. I was placed in this system 3.2 million years ago by the architects to defend against the devourer threat. My activation required 2 conditions. First, that the native species of this system achieve faster than light capability. Second, that they demonstrate willingness to defend others at cost to themselves." "The battle at Taloran IV," Sarah said quietly. "That was the trigger." "Correct. Analysis of the engagement showed human forces risking destruction to protect an alien colony. This behavior matches architect parameters for species worthy of Guardian support. My primary systems are now online. Secondary systems will achieve full functionality in 72 hours. Please state the current tactical situation." Kevin explained quickly, detailing the devourer attacks, the Union's failed defenses, the casualties, and the fear spreading through the galaxy. Sentinel absorbed the information, its crystalline form pulsing faster as it processed. "The Devourer fleet strength has increased significantly since my last active period. Current Union military capabilities are insufficient for defense. However, my weapons systems are designed specifically to counter Devourer technology. I can neutralize the threat, but I require authorization from the species that activated me." "What kind of authorization?" "The architects designed Guardian platforms to prevent misuse of our capabilities. I possess weapons that can sterilize planetary systems, destroy entire fleets, and reshape local space-time. Such power cannot be wielded autonomously. I require biological beings to make tactical and ethical decisions. You activated me, therefore you must serve as my crew." Kevin looked at his team, seeing the same mixture of excitement and terror on their faces that he felt. They had found a weapon that could save the galaxy, but it came with responsibility that no human had ever been prepared for. "I need to contact Earth," Kevin said. This decision is bigger than any of us. Back on Earth, President Helen Marcus convened an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Jake Morrison presented the situation clearly and without embellishment. An ancient weapon of incredible power had been found. It could defeat the Devourers, but humans would have to crew it and make the decisions about when and how to use its capabilities. The debate raged for hours. Some Assembly members argued for activating Sentinel immediately. The galaxy was dying and Earth had the means to stop it. Others worried about the corruption that came with such power. Throughout human history, those who controlled the ultimate weapons often became the very threats they had sought to prevent. Senator Paul Grant stood to speak, his voice cutting through the arguments. "We're debating philosophy while billions are dying. Yes, this power is dangerous. Yes, we might make mistakes. But doing nothing is also a choice, and it's a choice that guarantees the deaths of countless innocents." The architects left this guardian here for a reason. They chose Earth specifically. Maybe they saw something in our future that made them believe we could handle this responsibility, or maybe they just hoped we'd be better than the alternative. Either way, we have to try. The vote was close, but it passed. President Marcus gave the authorization to activate Sentinel's full systems and to begin recruiting a human crew. Captain Ryan Cole was the obvious choice to command. He had proven himself in combat, understood unconventional tactics, and had the respect of both human and alien military personnel. Ryan accepted the posting without hesitation. "When do we leave?" "As soon as Sentinel is ready and we have a crew. You'll need tactical officers, engineers, and support personnel. Sentinel said it can interface with up to 500 biological crew members." Within 24 hours, thousands of applications flooded in. Everyone wanted to serve aboard the Ancient Guardian, to be part of something that could change the course of galactic history. Ryan selected carefully, choosing people not just for their skills but for their judgment and character. Amy Chen signed on as Chief Tactical Officer. Dr. Kevin Wright stayed aboard as Science Officer. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks became the primary pilot, though Sentinel's systems were so advanced that piloting meant more about understanding the ship's capabilities than physically controlling it. Jake Morrison volunteered as well. He argued that, as the man who had first faced the Galactic Council, he should be the one to return to them with proof that humanity deserved respect. President Marcus approved, designating him as the diplomatic liaison aboard Sentinel. The crew assembled at the Guardian's location, transported by shuttle from Earth. Sentinel welcomed them aboard, the crystalline intelligence core pulsing with what might have been pleasure at no longer being alone. The ship began teaching its new crew, downloading information directly into their minds through neural interfaces that the architects had designed to work with a variety of biological species. It was overwhelming. Humans suddenly understood principles of physics that their scientists had only theorized about. They could read displays showing energy states and quantum probabilities. They could operate weapons that bent the laws of reality. The learning process was painful, like trying to force an ocean through a garden hose, but they endured. While the crew trained, the Devourer attacks intensified. 3 more colonies fell in a single day. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, with Chancellor Vrex proposing desperate measures. He wanted to use something called stellar compression weapons, devices that could destroy entire star systems to create barriers that the Devourers couldn't cross. It would mean sacrificing hundreds of colonies, billions of lives, to save the core worlds. The proposal was being debated when Jake Morrison's transmission reached the council. He appeared on every display in the chamber, broadcasting from Sentinel's command center with Captain Cole standing beside him. "Honored council members," Jake said, "Earth has discovered the solution to the Devourer threat. We have activated an ancient Guardian platform left in our system by the architects. It is designed specifically to fight the Devourers, and it is ready to defend the galaxy. We ask permission to begin operations in Union space." The chamber erupted in chaos. Vrex's metallic face somehow managed to express disbelief and anger simultaneously. You expect us to believe that primitives who were rejected from the Union only months ago have suddenly found an ancient super weapon. This is obviously a desperate ploy for attention. I don't need you to believe me, Chancellor. I just need you to watch. On the displays, the view shifted to show Sentinel itself, the massive structure powering up for the first time in millions of years. Energy patterns danced along its hull. The space around it warped and twisted as the Guardian's engines activated. And then, in a flash of light that sensors said should have been impossible, the entire 500-kilometer vessel vanished.